being joined by Eleanor Burgess, who has said that she is thrilled to be the recipient of the 2016 Alliance Candetta National Graduate Playwriting Award. Previous plays have been produced by the Last Act Theater Company, Centenary Stage Company, and the Samuel French Off-Broadway Festival, and developed at the Huntington Theater, the Kennedy Center, the NNPN MFA Playwrights Workshop, Merrimack Repertory Theater, and Luna Stage. She has been a playwright fellow at the Huntington Theater Company, a recipient of an EST Sloan Rewrite Commission, and a member of the writers group at the Arcola Theater in London. Originally from Brookline, Massachusetts, she has studied history at Yale College and playwriting at NYU Tisch School of the Arts. Moreover, Burgess is the recipient of the Susan Glaspell Award from Centenary Stage Company, where Start Down received development last spring in the Women's Playwright Series. Welcome, Eleanor. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here.
It's a pleasure.
Digitally.
Yes. Our first question. What was the motivating force for you to create the play Start Down?
So the play, how did I create it? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the play began, I guess, 2.5 years ago. My husband runs a startup called HireArt, recruiting company, and he was out in Mountain View, California, where the Google offices are, doing a startup incubator called Y Combinator. And he was living in one of those, it was like a flop house, like with a bunch of programmers all living in this house. And I went out to visit. And I was completely fascinated by this world. I instantly knew that I wanted to write a play about it. I was struck by the optimism of the tech world, this like belief like we're gonna fix all the world's problems and we're gonna be the ones to do it, we're gonna make money doing it, and it's gonna be amazing, and like everything can get better. I was really fascinated by that. And then the thing that, but because for me, I can be very afraid of change and very afraid of utopian thinking. So that gap was interesting to me, and I'm very afraid of technology sometimes. And then the other thing that had to click was that to decide what the startup in the play was going to be about, I wanted to make it personal for me. I worked as a teacher for 5 years before I went to NYU to study playwriting. And so for me, making it about education was this topic where I cared so much and had so many opinions. And that was, once those two ideas came together, I was off and running.
Now, do you believe that technology is a wonderful way for us humans to solve the world's problems, or in your exposure to technology and you're seeing that whole tech side of life out in California, did you find that there are many problems inherent in the technologies that we have today?
I mean, I think both. I think definitely both. I think it's very easy to see some of the things about technology that are scary. It potentially presents a major threat to our jobs and livelihood. Computers are willing to work 24 hours a day for no money, and they don't have health insurance. So that's scary. And then also, you know, anyone who is older and works around young people, this being glued to your phone, and it's not just young people, so we're sort of all glued to our phone. We're not as good at looking up. We're not as good at making eye contact. We're very much in our own little bubble. That's scary. I think that technology makes it easy for us to distract ourselves instead of working on serious problems. All of those are very scary, but I think it's also really easy to undervalue how phenomenally tech can impact us. It lets you spread information almost universally for no money. Like the fact that you can be living in some random town in the middle of nowhere, and if you want to learn about like advanced microphysics, if you want to learn about French cinema, if you want to learn about, you know, becoming president, like you can, and there's no barrier to access. I mean, some people don't have computers, but there's way fewer barriers to access. And so much ability to process information. So I think it's also really easy to underestimate how exciting technology is. And I think it has a lot of potential. We just have to be very smart about how we use it.
You say that you taught for 5 years. And I'm wondering, in today's schools, you know that there's a great influx of technology. And in a lot of schools, every student has a Chromebook. They're used by students now even to take the new age standardized tests. So how do you see technology in the schools? I know we just talked about it in our society, but in our schools, this influx of technology, is this a positive or is this a negative?
I think I'm going to be very repetitive because my answer is always going to be both. I think there's so much potential. I think that there's enormous potential to have, I mean, especially, and every teacher knows this is a good thing, differentiation. The ability to let a student, like one student's roaring ahead with a topic, they can go learn something new. They can use their time. They can try a special challenge on their book. And then another student struggling, maybe they can reread, rewatch a video. You know, I grew up in classrooms with no technology. And if you missed what a teacher said the first time they explained it, like, you could raise your hand, they'd have 3 minutes to try to explain it again. And if you missed that, you missed the lesson and you had to go get extra help, and there was no ability to personalize because it was one teacher with 25 kids. So I think that technology has enormous potential to let you personalize what the content that you get, to let you personalize the exercises that you get. And it has enormous potential to help teachers track what students are getting. You know, it can also grade really fast. Like, teachers are taking home so much work. They're so, you know, we work teachers to the bone, and anything that can help teachers do their work more efficiently is great. But I think that there's also, you have to be thoughtful. I mean, I think so often, like, when there's a new tool, we all want to use it. We have to be thoughtful about how we're using it, why we're using it. If we have people glued to technology all day, are they getting group work skills? Are they getting communication skills? Are they learning empathy? You have to carve out time in the curriculum to do group work. You have to carve out time in the curriculum to do mentoring on a more individual level with the teacher, so you're getting that face time. I think that there's also something, and I also, so I think you have to be really thoughtful, we have to be really sensitive. I think that also, you know, I taught history, I study history. One thing that's really hard to grapple with is that as things change, you gain things and you lose things. And so it's not that you're ever going to have a change where you don't lose anything in the process. So I grew up in classrooms where if you had a great teacher, they could guide you as a moral compass. You know, they could push your thinking further with a lesson. These things that if you're on a Chromebook and you're reading a textbook, it's not engaging with you and pushing you that way. But on the other hand, I also grew up where, like, if you had a teacher who really didn't know the content, you didn't learn the content. And I would have loved a Chromebook in those classes. So I think we gain and we lose, and we just have to be really thoughtful and have to make sure that we're getting what we value most out of education.
And that leads me right to Start Down, because the character Sandy is very conscientious and truly empathizes with her students. And then there's her husband, Will, who help her by creating a program that will help her students to recognize and thereby be better able to deal with their problems, but potentially that could make teachers like Sandy obsolete. Now, it seems like you're saying that your point is not to make teachers obsolete, but to help them to become more effective. Am I accurate with that?
I think, from my point, that's 100% true. I think, like, how great would it be if we could harness technology in the classroom to give teachers more time to be responding one-on-one to their students, to give teachers more time and more freedom to do their work in the best possible way. The flipped classroom model, the Google Docs model, there's a lot of different models that let you do that. I think for me, the worry is always, I don't always trust legislators to come up with the smartest plan. And I think that as a country, we all agree education's important. We all get really mad when schools are doing badly, but we refuse to invest in schools. And we're in the middle of a presidential election. How many candidates do you hear talking about K through 12 education? Literally none. No one's talking about it. So to me, my worry is not that technology should replace teachers and make them obsolete, but that we tend to penny pinch in all the wrong places. And I'm worried that politicians might see technology as a great way to make classrooms cheaper. And I think that would be a mistake. I think that then we end up with this super powerful tool and don't end up with better classrooms. And that would be just the worst. So I think we're at this crossroads where if we harness technology really well, we could have incredible, thoughtful, super-powered classrooms. But if we're cheapskates and if we are letting our education be in the hands of people who've never taught, which it often is, we might end up with a terrible system. So I want Start Down to be encouraging people to start to talk about those questions so that it doesn't just get left in the hands of people who might make bad decisions.
I'm interested in the title Start Down. We know that a lot of new companies are called startups, and it's a little play on words, but I'm sure there's more to it than that. Could you talk a little bit about that?
It definitely started as a play on words. It definitely started as like, oh, hee hee, that's funny. But I think for me, the reason why I stuck with it as a title is a lot of the play is about the unstoppability of change. Like the fact that you can't stop a train once it starts, sort of in the same way that in the 1920s, as soon as you had the discovery of relativity and quantum mechanics, it was only a matter of time before someone built an atomic bomb. Nothing in the world was going to stop that from getting invented. And I think that similarly, you have software, you have these, super-powered computers that are in our hands. You're going to get education technology. Someone's going to try to invent it. Someone's going to try. So the title for me is about starting down a path. Like once you start down a path, you're going to go down that path. And that's what happens in the play to Will. It starts with just, ooh, maybe, ooh, an idea, and then it becomes something that even he can't stop.
That's an interesting perspective. Now you talked about the folks in Silicon Valley being very unique and that they're the most optimistic people you've ever been around. Do you think that their optimism, is justified, that their optimism generates from something that maybe those outside of tech don't realize?
I think absolutely. I think that I think it's very easy to take for granted how much progress we've already made. I was saying at the beginning, like, I most days totally take for granted the fact that I have the internet. And that the second I want to know something, I get to know it. I'm like, oh, of course I do. But when we look at how revolutionary that is, how amazing that is, life has already changed spectacularly in the 20th century and now again in the 21st. And we're now carrying around in our pockets devices that are more powerful than things that used to fill a warehouse at a couple elite universities. And almost everyone has them just right in their pockets. So that's insane. So I think that there's a lot of optimism. And I think that what I love about Silicon Valley, the optimism comes with don't settle for the way things are. Don't assume that the way things are is good enough. Like, what if we didn't have to spend our time going for an hour and a half to the grocery store every week? And what if we got to spend that time with our family? What if we didn't have to, carry around 7 heavy textbooks in our backpacks and get lectures about scoliosis as teenagers. What if we could have them all in one ebook reader and have more textbooks than you could possibly imagine in one place? Like, why settle for the way things are, I think is a really exciting lens. And it's kind of a lens that I wish more people had. I mean, I've referenced this already, but with the election, I wish that people had more outside the box ideas, like, hey, we've never done this before, let's try it. I think that's really exciting, but I also think that it again comes down to being smart about it. Like, I think that it's really easy with startups to have people get really excited about like dumb ideas, and it's like, is that really making life that much better? So there's a lot of hype, and there's a lot of really exciting stuff going on.
Now, in Start Down, you use a lot of humor to infuse your treatment of a very serious subject. So I'm wondering, as a playwright, what gave you the idea to bring in humor to drive your message?
I love that question. For me, I always think that I owe my audiences entertainment. I think it's a wonderful, generous thing what a theater audience does. They come in and they trust you with 2 hours of their life, which is not nothing. They could be spending those 2 hours, you know, out on a date. They could be spending it at home with their kids. They could be getting emails done. They give you 2 hours. And I think that you owe them a great 2 hours. And I think humor is a really great, you know, getting together in a room, especially theater, where it's not like watching something funny on TV. When you're around other people and you're all laughing together, I think that's a wonderful experience. It makes you realize that you have something in common with strangers you've never met. I think for me, my favorite structure, what I try to always have in my writing is like, laugh, 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 oh crap. Like, the play will be very, very funny, and all of a sudden you realize it's very serious. Because I think that that is a way to pull the audience along. Like, no one wants to watch a 2-hour debate about education technology. But a 2-hour comedy that by the end has shown them the pros and the cons and given them a lot to think about, they'll watch that. So I sort of, it's like a bait and switch. Like, you use the comedy and then you end up having a message in a debate.
So you're basically taking the direction out of the social satirists, back as far as Jonathan Swift and even farther back, to get your message across. I think that's very clever.
Absolutely. And I think about, you know, people like Charlie Chaplin. Like, I think a lot of very powerful social commentary comes in the form of comedy. There's a quotation that someone told me in grad school, I can't remember who, that people who write drama are optimists and people who write comedy are cynics. And often comedians, when you meet them, they're incredibly serious people.
Yes.
I mean, Louis C.K. is a great example. He's an incredibly serious person. He's very worried about the world, and that's where the comedy comes from. So I think that that's a tradition I'm really tapping into.
Now, every play, unfortunately, comes to a close, and the curtain closes on the performers when they deliver their final lines. As the audience files out of the theater, what message do you hope that they're going to take with them, and even more so, what action do you hope they're going to take?
That's a great question. For me, when I'm writing, it's always less, oh, here's the message, because I like to write about things that I don't know the right answer. If I knew the right answer, I'd write a blog post. Like, I'd write a little campaign slogan. I like to write about things that I think are really complicated, and what I'd love for people to be thinking about as they file out is, oh God, we have to talk about this. Not like, oh, she's just shown me the right answer, but wow, I want to talk to my spouse about this, or I want to go home and talk to my kids about this. I want to go talk to their teachers about this. I want to start the conversation. So I'm always hoping that my plays become a jumping off point for long conversations where it's the initial seed and then people take those ideas and come up with their own, you know, thoughts and their own actions. I think in terms of actions, I'd love for more, you know, in general, unless you happen to have a kid in the school system, people are very unaware of what's going on in schools. Like, and I've already been on my soapbox about this. We don't pay enough attention to schools. We don't pay enough attention to what resources they have, what challenges they have, you know, and if people don't happen to have a kid in a school, they haven't visited them. So I'd love for people to see the play and say, hey, I should talk to my state senator about testing in schools, about school funding. I should go visit a classroom and see what's going on. I should talk to my teenager and ask them whether they like how technology is being used in their classroom. I should start talking to people and start wondering about this. And ideally, I'd love for it to result in really smart legislation, better funding for schools, and better expectations for how we can blend a classroom.
That brings up an interesting question, for me at least. Have you attempted to reach out to the politicians of the world, the local officials of the world, and have you tried to say to them, I have this message in a play that I think you need to hear. Why don't you come and give it a listen?
That's a great notion. I know that there's, because with the Centenary production, since we're in New Jersey, there's a group coming from the Woodrow Wilson School at Princeton. So not current policymakers, but future policymakers seeing the show. We just had a production in Atlanta. We did a lot of outreach with school administrators, bringing in a lot of principals to come see the show. Some people on school boards, superintendents were coming to see the show. But even, I mean, I'd love to reach out to state legislators, and I hadn't really thought about that, but absolutely, I'd love to be doing that. But like the wonderful thing about a democracy is also, if you get anyone's attention, you might get the right person's attention. So even if you just have a parent in the audience see the play, and they're like, huh, this makes me think a lot, maybe they'll call their representative, you know? So you never know how many people you're reaching. You know, theater is a lot like education. It's a lot like being in a classroom. You never know how far the effects are going to go, because if you reach in a classroom 20 people, who's to say who those people will talk to and affect for the rest of their lives? And I think it's the same way with theater.
Eleanor Burgess, thank you so much. I know your time is very valuable.
Thank you for having me.
What we appreciate you sitting here and giving us a little insight into your play. I know that your play is going to be a big success at Centenary Stage, and we invite one and all to come and hear your message and maybe think a little bit too on their way out of the theater. How does this affect me, and how does this affect the people around me as well?
Yeah, so, come laugh, have fun, and then start talking.
That's a good formula for success. Eleanor Burgess, once again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. For Centenary Stage Company, I'm Joe Pizzo.